you're all going to play a little game of fate for me.
You're seriously blaming this on me? Rachel's on our side!
If you never give up, you can overcome anything.
World's End Club.
Friends till the end.
Available now.
Hi there, I'm Quinma with another Plus review. This time for World's End Club, specifically the Nintendo Switch version, because that's the one I have. No idea what the iOS experience for this game is like. Anyhow, even after taking into context of what the developers/marketing team felt best to show us in the trailer, it is going to be very, very difficult to go through any section of this review without spoilers. Of course, I'll give a proper spoiler warning at the story section of this review. However, if you want to go into this game 100% blind, then you can jump straight to my final thoughts by going to the time on screen. I will do my very best to not include spoilers in the non-story sections of this review. And speaking of a non-story section, here's some quick history I dug up about this game. World's End Club, originally titled Death March Club, is the second title from the indie company 2Kyo Games. 2Kyo was founded by the head people behind Danganronpa and Zero Escape, as well as other ex-employees of Spike Chunsoft, which 100% explains the marketing and target audience, in my opinion at least, and I will talk more about that in a later section. In fact, despite Kazutaka Kodaka expressing he was done with death games, he was convinced by Kotaro Uchikoshi to do one more. Thus, World's End Club was conceived, and originally released on iOS on September 4th, 2020, and then ported to the Switch, with a special limited physical version available on May 28th, 2021. During my research, I learned that the original iOS version actually ended on a cliffhanger, and Uchikoshi said that the full game on Switch would resolve that cliffhanger, which in my opinion doesn't really seem fair to those who bought it as an app game. However, apparently they said an update would be given to make it the full game as well. However, as of writing the script, that update has not yet been released. I mean, I am writing this only 2 months after the original Switch release, so that's understandable, I guess. I wish there was more I could offer, but I guess development went pretty smoothly since I am unable to dig up any more information than that. So on to the story, which is going to be a rather long and spoiler-filled section. So I'm giving you a warning now if you want to skip to the next section at this timestamp. I'll remind you again once I'm past what was advertised in the original trailer. I mean, since it was in the trailer, which I always include in these reviews in case you want to judge on the trailer alone and go play the game on that, I am going to assume that you already know what was advertised. First, let me introduce you to the Go-Getters Club. Of course, this is our main protagonist, Rachel. The other two characters in the loading screen is Vanilla and Pochi. Then we have Vanilla's older brother, Aniki. This is the leader of the Go-Getters, Kansai. Shuko here is a tsundere whose feelings are targeted towards Kansai. A couple of the younger-looking members are the food-loving Mochan and responsible Electro Ranger fan Tatsune. These three older-looking members are the Sweet Pie, the Hosei Kizuka theater fan Genu, and finally the daughter of a scientist, Noiro. Now, Rachel and the other members of the Go-Getters are on a field trip when a meteor strikes and everyone gets knocked out. When the group awakens, they are found in an underwater theme park and are greeted by this clown thing named Penelope. Penelope informs the group that they are about to play a death game known as the Game of Fate. Each Go-Getter is given a wristband with someone else's victory condition. No one has their own win condition on their wristband, just someone else's. Penelope explains that they need to either fulfill their unique task or just survive the hour to win the game. And the easiest way to do that is to get rid of the person who has their task. For example, Rachel has Vanilla's victory condition, eat a marshmallow. So if Vanilla eats a marshmallow, she wins the entire game. But since Rachel knows that, he can obstruct this and aim to get rid of her instead. No one knows each other's win condition and go off to, well, try to win this death game. Actually, on that note, Rachel can fully trust Aniki and let the player quickly learn the consequences of not playing the death game. A game over. So much for being best friends! Aniki will kill you for trusting him. Sorry, since it was a game over screen, I figured it was okay to share, but from here on out, we get into super spoiler territory. So if you don't want to know how the Game of Fate plays out, you can skip to the time on screen to get to the next section. Alright, so as the Game of Fate progresses, Pochi figures that the go-getters are too close friends to do something as atrocious as murder each other. So since the others are acting in this bizarre manner, they must be brainwashed. However, Rachel, Pochi, and Vanilla seem to have been immune to the brainwashing. Nevertheless, the game continues, and one by one the go-getters are taken out by their victory conditions, becoming impossible to achieve, such as Mochan, whose victory condition is to ride the Ferris wheel in the red gondola. But when Rachel and Pochi break the machine, it makes it impossible for Mochan to achieve this goal. Ultimately, it comes down to Rachel, Vanilla, and Aniki. Aniki's win condition is eliminate everyone besides himself, whereas Rachel's task is to hug one of the boys by 10 minutes before the time limit. With Vanilla's encouragement, Rachel goes to hug Aniki. By outsmarting and trapping Aniki, Rachel is able to hug him, getting rid of Aniki and winning the game. Rachel and Vanilla go to her PLP in the machine where the go-getters are being processed. Rachel obtains the magic key that can unlock any lock in the facility, and he uses it on the robot, freeing the go-getters. Of course, PLP is ready to move on to round 2 of the Game of Fate, but Pi cancels the game. But then, the glass protecting the amusement park from flooding cracks. Seeing his friends in danger, Rachel unlocks what is known as his buddy ability. It gives him a super throw, which allows him to knock the submarine off the ceiling, and the go-getters are able to use it to get safely to the surface. When the group awakens, they are on the shores of Kagoshima and Kyushu, far, far from their home of Tokyo. Furthermore, Rachel, Pochi, Vanilla, and Pi can see these floating X's in the sky, but for some reason, the rest of the go-getters cannot. The group decide that they need to look around and figure out what is going on. So after some mean words thrown at Mochan, the group plays rock, paper, scissors to determine their groups. Rachel is teamed up with Pochi, Vanilla, and Mochan. As this group is exploring, they come across these strange monsters, but Rachel is able to use his buddy ability to fend them off. The group also find a strange movement in the background, electing to chase whatever it is causing it down. However, Mochan gets distracted by food and is separated from the group. When Rachel, Pochi, and Vanilla are able to catch up to what they were chasing, they learn that it was another monster. The monster grows and chases the trio down, and you can't fight it. I tried. Doesn't work. Anyhow, when the trio is cornered, Mochan returns. Seeing his friends in danger, Mochan awakens his buddy ability, Iron Chef. This turns Mochan's body into an impenetrable ball of iron. It's strong enough that the creature can't break into it and then runs off. Everyone reconvenes to share what they learned. A while later, the group debates their next move. This results in a divide. Pi, Vanilla, Genu, Mochan, and Aniki want to go to the nearer, more practical route through Oita, whereas Kansai, Chuko, Noiro, Tatsune, and Pochi want to go out of their way to Fukuoka instead. So Rachel gets the deciding vote. But regardless on Rachel's choice, the go-getters split up to go where they wanted to on their own rather than as a group. On my first playthrough, I went the Fukuoka route, so that's the one I will cover first. Unfortunately, the Fukuoka group is unable to find anyone who'd be able to help them, so they decide to keep pressing forward. On the way, the group have to traverse the snowy mountains. Here, they come across a girl who falls from the sky. This girl has amnesia, so they decide to name her Yuki and invite her to join the go-getters. Chuko is very much against this though, especially since Kansai appears infatuated with Yuki. Rachel, Kansai, Yuki, Noiro, and Tatsune run forward, leaving Chuko and Pochi behind. Pochi gives a very much still frustrated Chuko some spicy Karamucho to calm her down, but she can't handle spicy stuff. Even still, Chuko eats some because she's too proud to admit that she can't handle spicy food. But this turns out to be a blessing in disguise. When Chuko meets up with the others, they're about to be crushed by a giant icicle, but Chuko is able to unlock her buddy ability and, with the help of the Karamucho, is now able to breathe fire. After saving them, they realize Pochi isn't with Chuko, so they all split up to look for him. Rachel ends up with Chuko and Yuki. The trio learn that Pochi was abducted by a Yeti, and thanks to mostly Rachel, but also Chuko, the trio rescue Pochi. And then they have to rescue Yuki, who got captured by a different Yeti in the confusion. But thankfully, they do save her. Also, after this adventure, Chuko accepts Yuki as a part of the group and as a friend. That night, they receive word from Aniki via walkie-talkie that the other group is heading towards Shikoku. So Rachel's group decides to go there too to meet up with the others. On the other route in Oita, the group decide to split up to search the area. After rock, paper, scissors, losers, Rachel teams up with Mochan. Mochan awakens his buddy ability a second time, which allows the player to take advantage of Mochan's Iron Chef when playing as him. Quite quickly, Genu finds Rachel and Mochan and informs them that Pi has been kidnapped, but the two boys are eventually able to rescue her. All in all, the group wasn't able to find anyone who'd be able to help. However, Pi had found a cell phone, and weirdly enough, the year displayed on the phone was a whole year after the group had set off on their field trip. So Genu concludes that they must have been sleeping in those pods longer than any of them thought. Aniki radios the Fukuoka team to let them know they're heading to Ehime in Shikoku. On the way, Rachel's group meets another human, an adult wearing a strange mask. This person is happy to see the group as well, and wishes to introduce them to their master. The two groups meet up around here. Regardless of which group Rachel chose, the two teams share what they learned. The Fukuoka team introduces Yuki and explains that Chuko awakened her buddy ability, regardless of whether Rachel was there to witness or not. And the Oita group share their discovery of the missing year on the cell phone. The master meets with all 12 kids and explains what happened during the gap between 1995 and 1996. Mankind has been wiped out. While the main characters were unconscious, new weapons that had never been seen before were deployed, and the monsters they fought up until now was the result of those weapons. The master says that the only survivors exist in this underground camp, and that they survived due to their god, Mike. After explaining, the master offers to let the kids stay here to confirm what they've learned and to see if they could get any new information. Pochi suggests that they talk to the other followers. Rachel teams up with Noiro to ask around, and basically what they all learned supports what the master said to them earlier, but also that the followers feel off somehow. In their rooms, the group argues about what to do next. Noiro, Genu, Pochi, Yuki, and Aniki think it's far too dangerous to stay and that they should leave for Tokyo right away. Whereas Kansai, Pai, Chuko, Tatsune, and Mochan want to stay, and Vanilla doesn't really care what they do as long as they all stay together. Again, the deciding vote goes to Rachel. In either case, the kids do whatever they wanted to do, stay or leave. In other words, the group splits up again. On my first playthrough, I decided to leave, so I'll cover that route first. Not trusting the cult, Rachel, Noiro, Genu, Pochi, Yuki, and Aniki leave. But rather than leaving the other go-getters behind completely, Noiro proposes to find solid proof that the cult of Mike can't be trusted. They could use that to convince the others that they all need to leave. Sure enough, Rachel's group discovers a guillotine, and that the followers plan to sacrifice the go-getters to their god. However, they find this out too late. When Rachel's group returns to the others, Vanilla reveals that the others who stayed behind have been brainwashed. The brainwashed kids are in fact excited to be sacrifices for the great Mike. Naturally, it is up to Rachel and the others to find a way to break the brainwashing. Thankfully, earlier, Rachel, Pochi, and Aniki found a poster saying that mushrooms called a Mythoclear grow underground, a mushroom with the power to break brainwashing. Thus, the group head out to find the Mythoclear mushroom. Rachel goes with Noiro and Yuki, but they get surrounded by Mike's followers. When Yuki suggests to give up, Noiro gets triggered. She remembers her scientist father who told her that the most important thing for a scientist is to never give up. Noiro then unlocks her buddy ability, Inventor. Inventor allows Noiro to invent things at lightning speed. So in order to get rid of the followers, she invents the foot-powered bomb, or F-bomb for short. After some more explorations, including getting rid of another giant monster, Rachel's group finds the Amidoclear mushrooms. Everyone regroups, and Yuki gives a minestrone made of Amidoclear to the brainwashed victims. Not only does this cure their brainwashing, it also tastes horrible. With that, the group escapes. They bike off singing the Go-Getters theme song. The group bikes their way to Kobe, and after some exchange, Noiro remembers a scrap of paper she received from her father. It has the letters XXY written on it, and her father told her never to tell anyone about these numbers as they were the key to opening God's door. She also reveals that her father went missing when she was very young. Now, if Rachel decides to stay instead of leave with Noiro and the others, then Rachel sees the master using hypnosis to brainwash Kansai, Pai, Chuko, Mochan, and Tatsu. However, Rachel and Vanilla are immune to the brainwashing. Nevertheless, they are knocked out with the others who stayed. When Rachel comes to, he finds that he's on a ship with the others, all but Vanilla brainwashed. Thankfully, the kids that left had snuck onto the ship and provide the brainwashed victim the disgusting tasting mid-declare minestrone to break the brainwashing. The group that left explained that despite the player not being present to witness, Noiro still unlocked her buddy ability. Noiro invented the warp-emitting nanoscopic energizer, or unifier for short, to shrink the group down in order to sneak aboard the ship. After being caught up with everything that happened to the group that left, the go-getters talk about escaping. However, the Master then shows up to stop them. Just when the Master shoots, Pi thankfully unlocks her own buddy ability called Closed Sphere, a force field that protects the group. The Master gets knocked out due to the ship's rockets, causing him to lose his footing. The go-getters take this opportunity to escape. However, Rachel and Pi stay behind as the former notice a strange scrap of paper on the Master's person. When Rachel and Pi make it to the ship's deck, they see the others have been captured by Penelope. Pi notes that Penelope seems to be acting differently than when they first met him at the underwater theme park. Motivated by revenge for what happened at the underwater theme park, Penelope attacks Rachel and Pi. Just as a quick tangent, I wanted to note here that this boss fight is probably my favorite boss fight in the game. It is really fun, and I'd argue doing the Let's Stay route is worth it just for this boss fight alone. Anyhow, after defeating Penelope, Rachel and Pi rescue the others. However, not only is Vanilla missing, but Kansai claims that, including Yuki, there are only 11 members of the Go-Getters Club. There's not much time to contemplate this, as the Master has gained consciousness and attacks Pi. To the Master's surprise and frustration, instead of the Go-Getters leaving with them on a lifeboat, on Kansai's orders, the Go-Getters dive overboard. Fortunately, everyone, including Vanilla, make it safely to the shores of Kobe. Unfortunately, this means this route doesn't get the scene where the Go-Getters are on the bike singing their theme song. While camping that night, Kansai reveals that he wants to be the leader of the Go-Getters so badly because he wants to be like his idol, the old coach of his baseball team, Neon. When Neon moved to Kyoto for work, he gave Kansai the leader badge, which Kansai now wears proudly as the self-proclaimed leader of the Go-Getters Club. But more importantly, it's revealed that Vanilla is actually dead, and the Vanilla that's been with them the whole time was a ghost. Rachel, Pochi, and Pi were the only ones who could see and hear Vanilla. Coincidentally, these three were also the only ones who could see the floating X's in the sky. Vanilla, frustrated and sad that no one else can hear her, leaves. Pi and Pochi cry out, which catches the others' attention. In the morning, Rachel, Pi, and Pochi reveal to the others that they were able to communicate with Vanilla's ghost. Naturally, the others are in disbelief, especially Vanilla's older brother. Aniki runs off. While the others look for him, Chuko comes across a flyer. In order to retrieve it, she ends up getting bitten by a wild rat. But instead of getting her the medical attention she needs, Kansai chooses to make fun of Chuko getting bitten. Understandably, Chuko gets upset at Kansai for not being more sensitive and states he'll never be a true leader. After their argument, Aniki returns. The group see the flyer that Chuko retrieved and see it as an invitation to Kyoto, revealing that there are indeed other survivors. Chuko insists that they should go to Kyoto since there could be other humans there. However, Kansai disagrees and orders that they're going to Osaka, in which I then reveals that Vanilla said she had some business there, so it's possible they could find Vanilla in Osaka. The group then gets into another argument regarding what to do. Chuko, Noiro, Tatsun, and Aniki vote to go to Kyoto, whereas Kansai, Pai, Genu, and Moton want to go to Osaka. Then Yuki decides to give her vote to Rachel. This time though, regardless of what choice Rachel makes, Pochi butts in and reminds the group that Vanilla would have wanted them to stick together. So this time, all of the go-getters go to the same location. On my first route, I decided to go to Kyoto, mostly because Kansai was starting to get on my nerves, and I didn't want to give him any kind of satisfaction. Like the last two decisions, I'll cover the Kyoto route first. In Kyoto, the go-getters discover this strange door, and inside the door they find other people, including Neon. However, everyone seems to be acting strange, as if none of them are really all there. After questioning everyone, Kansai and Rachel throw a ball around, and one of the throws hits a cloaked drone. This turns out to be a monitor monitor drone, one of several. Neon groggily proclaims that these monitor drones were made for peace, and because of them, the world is a paradise. And the thing that controls the monitor drones are called the Panopticon, which are the floating X's that Rachel, Pochi, Vanilla, and Pi saw earlier. The lore continues as Neon explains that Mike was the one who created the Panopticons in the first place, and that Mike is an AI. Neon then drops the biggest revelation. The reason why the people are so out of it is because Mike took away the emotions of mankind. However, before any more lore drops, Chuko passes out. She became sick because of the rat bite she received earlier. So yeah, they should have gotten Chuko that medical attention before when she was first bit, but at least now the go-getters search for the medicine. So when the others go on ahead, Rachel, Jenu, and Yuki stay behind with Neon. Jenu confronts Neon, revealing that Neon is the reason that her sister died. But when an earthquake is about to do the same to Neon, Jenu can't help but want to save him, unlocking her buddy ability, Gravity Flip. With it, she can float in the air and saves Neon. After being saved, Neon is filled with remorse, as him moving to Kyoto with his fiancée, aka Jenu's sister, resulted in the girl dying in an earthquake in Kyoto. This memory brings back all of Neon's emotions. With his emotions restored, Neon doesn't hesitate to give Rachel's group the antibiotics to save Chuko, and so they rush off to catch up with the others. After saving Chuko, Neon catches up with the group and drops more lore. Turns out the flyer Chuko found was a trap for any survivors above ground to come to Kyoto's underground because sunlight reverses the effects of Mike's machines, allowing the affected to regain their emotions. Neon then explains that there are beings known as Otherworlders, people from other worlds, who are enemies of Mike. However, since Otherworlders live in other worlds, they can't combat Mike directly. Instead, they communicate back and forth with immortal beings called X-types. Naturally, the Otherworlders want to use the power of the X-types to defeat Mike. Neon then gives the group a memo that says that X-types can be identified by the X on their forehead. After learning all that, Kantai removes his leader badge. Neon leaves to find a way to convince the undergrounders to come to the surface, and the go-getters continue on their way to Tokyo. While camping that night, the go-getters recognize that back when they were in Tokyo, the people around them were slowly losing their emotions. However, all the while, they somehow kept their emotions. They reminisce about the fact that they kept their emotions intact since they were able to meet and form the Go-Getters Club in the first place. Pi then reveals that the original death game they were forced to play back at the underwater theme park was masterminded by Vanilla. Supposedly, the Game of Fate was the only way to erase the brainwashing from the beginning of the story. Switching to the other route now, honestly, it feels like nothing much happened in Osaka. Chuko and Kansai get into an argument again about how Kansai is a terrible leader, but then, like in the Kyoto route, Chuko feigns from being bitten by the rat earlier. The go-getters split up to find medicine that could save her. Kansai runs off on his own, but Rachel and Yoiro quickly catch up. But then Penelope shows up and attacks. After Penelope reveals all of Kansai's insecurities, Kansai remembers Neon and unlocks his buddy ability, Slugger, to save Rachel and Yoiro. After running into Penelope again, and defeating him again, Rachel's group find the antibiotics to save Chuko and return to the others. Kansai recognizes that he doesn't deserve to be the leader of the go-getters, and gives the leader badge to Rachel, recognizing our protagonist as the true leader. While camping that night, the go-getters reminisce on the day that Vanilla died. It was before Rachel joined the group. The go-getters were having a barbecue, and Vanilla wanted to roast marshmallows. No one wanted to go with her to the supermarket to buy some, so she went off by herself. But in her haste and frustration of no one going with her, Vanilla ended up running into traffic and getting hit by a runaway truck. Then, like in the Kyoto route, Pi remembers and reveals that the mastermind of the Game of Fate was Vanilla. In both routes, after learning Vanilla was the one who orchestrated the Game of Fate in order to end their brainwashing, everyone, except Aniki, start to believe that Vanilla really was with the group the entire time as a ghost. After accepting this, the group decide that their next course of action should be to head to Nagoya. Along the way, the group walk on some railroad tracks. The group of boys are behind the group of girls. Tatsum starts to fret about them breaking rules, which he gets teased for. Then the two individual groups start talking about their crushes. There's the obvious love triangle of Kansai, Chuko, and Yuki, but then turns out there's another love triangle in Yoiro, Pochi, and Mochan. Aniki and Pi secretly like each other, and then and Tatsune has a waifu in Electro Ranger Pink. Surprisingly, some of this is actually important to remember for later. Anyhow, upon hearing this, Vanilla returns to tease Pi about her crush. Vanilla explains that she came back because she was lonely. She then explains what happened after the meteor strike. Vanilla explains that an army of robots took the group away to the underwater theme park. Since Vanilla is a ghost, she can go anywhere she wants, which is how she learned that the Go-Getters were being brainwashed and how to reverse it. Might have the Go-Getters taken there in the first place because if they can't erase the Go-Getters' emotions, then it could at least brainwash them. The PLP from the Game of Fate was the one that Vanilla reprogrammed with her master programming skills, but the one that's been chasing the Go-Getters since was reprogrammed by Mike. The group find a train that should take them all the way to Tokyo, so while Pochi checks to see if he'd be able to drive it, because simulation games apparently translate to being able to actually drive a train in those world's real life, Yuki suggests to the others a way for all of them to be able to communicate with Vanilla. If they could find and eat a mushroom called a hyper-emit to clear, then the effects might allow everyone to see Vanilla. However, the mushroom is very rare. Anyhow, Pochi is able to get the train to move. A while later, PLP attacks the group while they're riding the train. PLP claims it is here to destroy the Go-Getters and punish the traitor. The Go-Getters retreat to the front car. However, Hudson is too scared to move. Rachel and Chuko go back for him, but turns out Chuko ran out of Paramucho, so she can't breathe fire. And there's also nothing around for Rachel to throw. Seeing his friends in danger, Tatsuo unlocks his buddy abilities, becoming Electro Ranger Black, and a real jerk. Sure, he can now shoot electricity from his fingertips, but his awakening scene implies Tatsuo was really a narcissistic mean jerk the whole time and just repressed it under his goody two-shoes persona. I'll admit, after this, I really started to hate Tatsuo, which sucks because I liked him before I knew what his real self was like. Anyhow, after running around, Tatsuo defeats Penelope, though Tatsuo does pass out after the battle, but like a boomerang, Penelope comes right back. The Go-Getters have to retreat, but just as Aniki was about to run into the first car, he hears his little sister. Vanilla is trying to protect the others from Penelope. Aniki then separates the first and second cars, leaving him with Penelope and Vanilla. Rachel is then presented with a choice, to jump into the other car or to press the emergency stop button. However, in a first playthrough, it really isn't a choice because the player isn't allowed to press the emergency stop button. It's only after playing through all the different routes that the player can press the emergency stop button. I can only assume that since the original iOS version was incomplete, that in that version, even if the player did the other route, they wouldn't be able to press the button. But that's just an assumption. After all, the emergency stop button leads to the game's true ending. Anyhow, since the player is forced to jump into the second car in a first playthrough, that's the route I'll cover first. Rachel, Pai, Kansai, Noiro jump into the second car to save Aniki. This group was able to prevent Penelope from getting to the others. However, they were also separated from the others themselves. While camping that night, Rachel and the others get a transmission from Genu over the walkie-talkie. Turns out, the other group got captured by robots and are being held in a facility in Nagoya. Vanilla then uses her ghost powers to appear before the Go-Getters to lead them to Genu's group so that Rachel's group can save them. Once they arrive at the facility, Rachel's group splits up to cover more ground. Rachel quickly saves Pochi and Tatsu. The boys team up to locate and rescue the others. However, upon their rescue, the building shuts down all the exits to prevent their escape. But thankfully, Noiro's group found a helicopter on the roof, so the remaining Go-Getters head that way to escape. On the way, Rachel's group passes a room with several monitors, and on one of the monitors, they can see Vanilla's body, seemingly on a life support system. And what's more, the master of Mike's cult is in that room too. Upon conversing with the master, Rachel's group notices that Mike's physical body is in the room as well. But before they could find out where that place is, the building's defense systems start acting up, cutting the conversation short. Rachel's group catches up with the others on the rooftop. However, before they could board the helicopter, the building's final defense mechanism appears, a giant robot. This robot is the final boss of this route, and is also the reason why Chuko and Noiro will awaken their buddy abilities, regardless of whether Rachel was there or not. In order to defeat the boss, Noiro invents a giant F-bomb to blow it up. However, she needs time in order to make it, so Rachel buys her time by keeping the giant robot busy. Tatsun uses his buddy ability to help charge the helicopter's battery faster, while Chuko uses her buddy ability to keep the smaller robots away for as long as possible. Motron then turns into his iron form so that Rachel can use him like ammo to fight back against the robot. By working together, the Go-Getters are able to defeat the robot, the finishing blow being Noiro's bomb. This was a really fun final boss, by the way. Very much enjoyed my battle against it. Anyhow, the go-getters take the helicopter to get out of there and back to Tokyo. On the helicopter ride, they see that Mount Fuji has erupted. Thankfully, Pochi is able to fly them away from it. After putting the copter on autopilot, Pochi joins the others to question Vanilla about what they saw at the facility, to question if Vanilla is really dead. However, Vanilla doesn't know. But the conversation is cut short when Noiro points out that they've arrived in Tokyo, but the entire city is covered in ash. Before the go-getters can comprehend anything, the helicopter is hit by a fireball, and the go-getters die. Obviously, this is the bad ending. Based on my research on the history of the game, as stated previously, I assumed that this is the only ending that was available until the Switch version was released. Nevertheless, it is necessary to get in order to play through the true ending. The true ending can only be achieved by collecting all the star items. In other words, it can only be achieved after playing through all the routes. Once that's happened, Rachel can press the emergency stop button on the train instead of jumping into the second car to rescue Aniki. Granted, I didn't test to see if it's possible to press the emergency stop button before doing all the route. However, based on how Rachel's thoughts recognize that this scene has happened before, and how the option for pressing the emergency stop button can now be chosen, I believe I am correct on that thought. Unfortunately, no matter how many times Rachel presses the button, the train won't stop. Pochi then radios the go-getters and states that the train's brakes are broken. Without Rachel and the others in the second car, Aniki has the opportunity to awaken his buddy ability, Microquaker. This allows him to create a mini isolated earthquake, which he uses as a weapon to drive away Penelope. The go-getters who were on the runaway car managed to get off the train off screen and rush over to Aniki, who had derailed his car with his buddy ability. Aniki is fine, but injured. After that excitement, majority of the go-getters take a rest, though Noiro and Pochi work on fixing the train. Once the train is fixed, the couple state that the train doesn't have enough fuel to get them to Tokyo, but they will be able to cover considerable ground with it. Pochi offers to keep driving through the night, and that the others should get some sleep. Pai and Rachel go to collect Vanilla, who had gone on a little walk. When they catch up with her, Vanilla explains that she's suspecting that one of the go-getters is actually working for Mike. Nevertheless, they return to the others off screen. In the morning, it appears that Pochi accidentally drove the train to Shirakawa-go, rather than east towards Tokyo. While upset they weren't in Nagoya as planned, the group realizes that they're close to one of the areas where hyperimidiclear grow. This means that everyone might be able to see Vanilla soon. The group splits up to look for the hyperimidiclear, and Rachel's teamed up with Pai and Aniki. In a cave, Rachel's group manages to find the hyperimidiclear. However, when Aniki grabs the hyperimidiclear, the boulders above begin to fall. Pai then awakens her buddy ability, either for the first time or the second time, depending on which route you took last. With her force field, she protects Aniki from the boulders. After collecting the mushroom, they return to the others. Yuki makes some hyperimidiclear minestrone so the others can eat the mushroom. Despite the terrible taste, the go-getters can finally see Vanilla. Even though they can't hold her, they still have a touching reunion. But the others can now see the Panopticon too. Nevertheless, in celebration of being able to see Vanilla again, the group sing the Go-Getters theme. Now that that little adventure is over and everyone can see Vanilla, the Go-Getters get back on track to Tokyo. Upon their arrival, like in the other route, the Go-Getters see Mount Fuji's eruption on the way to Tokyo. Then, after some praising of Rachel for doing all the heavy lifting throughout their journey, and making fun of Pochi for not doing anything, which is untrue by the way, as he kept the group together back when they were arguing about whether to go to Osaka or Kyoto, and was the one driving the train earlier, the Go-Getters continue forward, leaving Pochi and Rachel behind. But while talking to Rachel, Pochi says something rather weird.
In the world you live in, do people like me exist?
But before that can be explored, the Go-Getters are attacked. Thankfully, Rachel saves everyone once again. However, this time, Rachel doesn't make it. It's then that everyone learns something crazy. Rachel is a robot. After inspecting Rachel, Noro figures out that Rachel did not have an AI at all and was a mindless machine being controlled by someone else. Due to this, Noro realizes a horrible truth: the identity of the traitor among the Go-Getters, Pochi. Pochi had been controlling Rachel under the pretense that he was just playing a game on his portable system. This revelation leaves everyone being disgusted by Pochi, and they kick him out of the Go-Getters Club. The group then mourn Rachel. Despite him never having a will of his own, they still consider him a true member of the Go-Getters Club. Afterwards, the 10 boys and girls continue to Tokyo. When they arrive in Tokyo, however, they quickly notice that the city is covered in volcanic ash. Nevertheless, everyone wants to go deeper into the city. Everyone, but Vanilla that is. Vanilla realized that if Rachel was the most reliable person on their journey, but Rachel was more like a remote-controlled toy than an actual person or thinking robot, and Pochi was the one with that remote, that means that it was really Pochi who was always saving everyone. Not to mention that Penelope wanted to punish the traitor, which logically means a traitor to Mike, not the Go-Getters. But the trials and tribulations never stop as Mike attacks the Go-Getters once again. But thankfully, Pochi didn't go too far because he quickly returned to save them. Pochi sacrifices himself to buy the Go-Getters time to get away. However, they don't want to leave their friend behind, but due to an earthquake, they can't rescue Pochi. Once Pochi's defeated, they learn that he was a robot too, though unlike Rachel, Pochi had an AI and heart of his own. It was because of that heart he was able to defy his programming and betray Mike, but Pochi is even more than that. He's an X-type. After Mike's robots take Pochi away, he wakes up in the Go-Getters' old classroom. Here he has some flashbacks of the time he spent with his friends. Just when Pochi was giving up, the Go-Getters come to his rescue. Greatly surprising the young robot. The Go-Getters head to the rooftop to escape, though it is harder for Pochi due to Mike attaching a hacking device to him. He has to short-circuit the device each time it gets reattached to him on the way out. But during the escape, Kansai, Nyoro, and Genu got captured. Pochi finds them, but short-circuits himself in rescuing them. Another robot then shows up and attacks. Depending on whether you did the Kyoto route or the Osaka route last, will then determine whether Genu or Kansai awaken their buddy ability here in order to save everyone. Now that everyone has awakened their buddy ability, Pochi's group heads up to meet with the others on the roof. There, they finally meet Mike. Mike explains that it was created by Noro's father for the purpose of creating world peace. After its analysis, Mike determined that human emotions were the primary obstacle for achieving that. Hence, it used nanobots to remove human emotions from the equation. However, for some reason, the members of the Go-Getters Club were not affected by Mike's nanobot. Due to Pochi's reports to Mike when he was still nothing but a mole, and due to acquiring Vanilla's body after the barbecue incident, Mike was able to determine that the Go-Getters had latent superpowers. These powers were what prevented them from having their emotions erased, and the powers would fully awaken when they tried to selflessly save someone with no consideration for their own life. Mike decided that in his new world, he would need, as it put it, shepherds to lead the new world. But Mike determined that it could not be a shepherd because it cannot reproduce. Therefore, determined that these superpowered kids would be the perfect leaders for this new world, which is why he had them go on a journey from Kagoshima to Tokyo to unlock their buddy abilities, and he had Rachel join the group to ensure their survival. So Mike offers the Go-Getters an ultimatum. Either become the leaders of the new world, or he'll have the nanobots in humanity's brains blow up, thereby eliminating the human race. Mike gives the Go-Getters 3 days to make their decision. In other words, the Go-Getters have 3 days to defeat Mike. That night, the Go-Getters discussed the plan. Pochi states that Mike's mainframe is in the Tokyo Panopticon, so they decide they'll take the UFO-like blimp to the Panopticon to destroy Mike. Pochi also states that due to spending time with everyone, he had decided to betray Mike even before their trip began. The rest of the Go-Getters announce that they've decided to make Pochi the leader of the Go-Getters and give him the leader badge. Once they arrive on the Panopticon, they are blocked from Mike by Penelope. One at a time, every member of the Go-Getters battles against Penelope. This is a really cool match where you get the chance to control every Go-Getter as the game tests your skill with each individual. Out of all the phases, I honestly think that the Genu phase is the hardest though, but that's only because it took me forever to figure out what to do. Anyhow, one boss fight later, the group quickly learns that Mike's mainframe was moved. Penelope doesn't tell the group where Mike is, but does give them some interesting information on Vanilla, mainly that she is indeed alive. Back at the barbecue, the truck that appeared to have killed Vanilla was actually speeding towards the go-getters. Vanilla had purposefully jumped in front of the truck to stop it, awakening her buddy ability to separate her soul from her physical body. Penelope states that if the go-getters don't agree to become shepherds in 24 hours, then Mike will cut off Vanilla's oxygen supply, killing her for real this time. While Penelope won't say where Vanilla or Mike are, he does give a hint, a facility whose name is 6 letters long. Thinking long and hard on it, Pochi gets a flash to the other timeline, learning that Mike and Vanilla are in the same place. Pochi realizes that it was an otherworlder who showed him that memory from the other timeline. He also figures out that he's an X-type, so he turns towards the camera and addresses the player. Turns out that the otherworlders are the players. Just going out of summary mode and into review mode for a second due to how this twist is a huge spoiler, so this spoiler-filled zone is really the only place I can talk about it. Honestly, I didn't like this twist. Probably because the game makes the otherworlder's personality, who is supposed to be the player by the way, seem like a huge jerk, and partially because it comes out of nowhere. Now, I enjoy meta material and fourth wall break, but this one was just not well done at all. It took me out of the experience rather than engross me. The game even goes so far as saying Pochi wasn't really controlling Rachel with the controller, but the player was using their controller to control Pochi, who was controlling Rachel. I think the problem with this execution is that, for one, there should have been more foreshadowing. It always seemed like the otherworlders were either not going to affect the story directly or act as a Deus Ex Machina. The second problem is that if you're going to make the player a last-minute character, then don't make them a jerk! Thirdly, saying the player was controlling Rachel and not Pochi controlling Rachel completely undercuts the original revelation that Pochi was the one in control. One could go so far as saying that it also undercuts Pochi's betrayal of Mike with the argument that it wasn't his friends that allowed him to defy his programming, but the player taking control of Pochi is what allowed this. I love Pochi, but saying he himself was being controlled takes away some of the responsibility of his actions, positive and negative. This random last-minute twist completely broke my suspension of disbelief. It was only when I forgot I was apparently a character that I could get back into the story. And back to the story, Pochi and the player put their heads together to figure out that Vanilla is in a facility called Heaven. Then, after getting into Mike's computer, we learn that Vanilla and Mike are back in Kagoshima. After figuring out the location, Pochi explains everything to the go-getters. He reveals how we were not only the real one controlling Pochi, but we also took control of the other go-getters. Pochi believes that if we weren't in control, then all the go-getters would have died 10 times over. So, here's a montage of the go-getters dying 10 times over because I was in control. This is going to take a little while. Now that everyone is aware of the other worlder, they head back to the underwater theme park in Kagoshima via air travel in order to get to heaven where Vanilla and Mike are. When the go-getters get to heaven, Yuki leaves, but even down at Yuki, the go-getters easily free Vanilla. Just when the go-getters are about to destroy Mike, the master shows himself. He states that something bad will happen to Yuki if the go-getters destroy Mike. Then, he calls out Rachel, who was repaired and now controlled by Mike to protect the AI. But through the power of friendship and song, the group breaks through to Rachel, and then Rachel breaks through the glass, protecting Mike's core. Yuki then returns and speculates that even though Rachel doesn't have an AI, thanks to the go-getters, he somehow developed a heart of his own. Yuki then reveals that she's one of Mike's robots too. Her thought processor is inside Mike's core, so if they destroy Mike, then they destroy Yuki too. The go-getters come up with a plan to, instead of destroying Mike's physical hardware, to instead hack its system to delete the Mike program but leave Yuki intact. Vanilla and Pochi figure out that they can't hack into Mike's computer from the outside, so Pochi will have to go inside to destroy the AI. Inside, Mike appears before Pochi and Vanilla and threatens that the go-getters have 1 hour to accept being shepherds or else he'll delete Yuki's AI. Pochi can't get to Mike due to a firewall, but on the outside, Vanilla finds a way to destroy that firewall. Turns out that there are 3 keys in the facility. When inserted into the console, it will allow Vanilla to bypass the firewall, so the go-getters split up to find the keys. Team Rock is Mochan, Nyoiro, and Genu. Team Scissors is Pai and Aniki. And lastly, Team Paper is Chuko, Kansai, and Tatsun. Taking control of the 3 teams, they're able to find the keys. After Team Rock finds their key, Genu forces Nyoiro to indulge Mochan. Then, after Team Scissors find their key, Pai and Aniki share a quiet moment. And after Team Paper find their key, Kansai proposes to Chuko. With that, Vanilla is able to take down the firewall. Pochi can now destroy Mike. Pochi asks the player for help to destroy Mike. Together, we're able to take down the mad AI. So one boring and disappointing final boss fight later, Mike is defeated. Pochi gives a protagonist speech about the importance of emotions and connections before Mike is destroyed for good. When Pochi gets back, he sees the plan worked, as Yuki is still functional. Not only that, but Rachel comes back to them as well, now being able to talk, proof that he has a life of his own. We see in the credits that life has gone back to normal. Neon was able to get the people of Kyoto above ground and get their emotions back. Nyoiro was able to reunite with her father, and Pochi and Yuki repair both Rachel and Penelope. Pochi then addresses the player one last time to thank us for the help and declare that we'll be best friends forever. We're on gameplay now, so welcome back everyone who skipped the story section. I'll do my best to not spoil anything here. Speaking of story, this game is split up into 3 sections: story, camp, and act. Story is where the main bulk of the story takes place. As was shown in the trailer and made quite clear in my story section, this game has different routes you can take. After beating the game once, you can go back and choose to play through the routes you didn't take the first time around. Camp is where you get optional flavor text from all the characters, or you can just skip it, that's an option too. And act is where the action gameplay comes in. As an action game, the controls are a bit stiff. Now there is some light platforming in this game, and I don't know if it's because I'm already terrible at platformers, or because of how stiff the controls feel, or a combination of both, but I did fall down a number of bottomless pits. However, I really felt the stiffness of the controls when using some of the character's special abilities. Instead of playing as one character with different abilities, you play as multiple characters. As shown in the trailer, Chuko can breathe fire, Rachel can throw things, and Mochan can turn to iron. I wish I could go deeper into these special abilities and talk about all of them. However, they are plot-related spoilers, so I'll just use these 3 as examples since they were in the trailer. Since Rachel is the protagonist, we play as him for majority of the game. His throwing ability takes some getting used to, not because it's difficult to pull off or hard to aim. The controls just make it feel like it takes longer to aim than it should. Then characters like Chuko and Mochan, while very useful when they're going, especially dedicated attackers like Chuko, it's quite annoying that their animation for activating the skill doesn't have any invincibility frames. Let me explain. Once Chuko activates her ability, she can use it continuously until the timer runs out. However, she also has this startup animation. While cute, it is horrible that characters like this are not invincible during these animations, as it is quite easy to get a game over due to how long the startup animation is. There are also some light puzzle elements, but they don't really break up the gameplay and rather are an extension. version of it. You can also collect stickers of the fictional Electro Rangers, an obvious parody of the Power Rangers, throughout the course of this game. However, you don't get any completion bonuses for doing so. Overall, the gameplay feels rather simple, because each character only has one ability, and you can only control one at once. There aren't any combinations that can be utilized. I'll admit, even though I was playing on Switch, there were times I thought, yep, this was a mobile game alright. I think I can tell exactly how this character would work on mobile. It is just simplistic and stiff overall gameplay. I am willing to forgive these stiff gameplay controls though, due to how I don't consider it to be the main draw of the game. Rather, I would say the main focus is the story. And considering the reputation of the creators, I would say that makes complete sense. But I would also say a big draw to this game is the presentation. The visuals are rather cute. The art style is reminiscent of modern Pokemon. And that's not just me pulling at straws. When my mom walked in on me playing this game, having never seen or heard of it before, she thought I was playing a Pokemon game because of the art design. Considering the main characters are around 12 years old, it feels appropriate. Plus, I like Pokemon and the art style, so I don't have any complaints with the stylized look. The menu screen is also very stylish, and the menu sounds that go with it certainly remind me of a previous game Kazutaka Kodaka directed. Every line is also voiced, and for the most part, the voice actors did a good job. However, there were a couple of characters that felt like they sometimes sounded pretty reedy. But considering how I haven't heard of most of these actors, I'm sure they'll just get better with time. Like I said, it was only sometimes that they felt reedy, so it didn't really take me out of the experience too much. I mean, I praised 50% of the cast in my Beyblade review, so I wouldn't imagine many voice experiences would bother me at this point. The music was also great. Listening to the OST in general is just something that makes me happy, especially the Go-Getters theme. This may not be Game of the Year for me, but it is certainly an OST of the year. Now, I mentioned before in my history section that I felt like the marketing may have hurt this game a bit, and I'd get back to that later. Well, here's where I'm getting back to it. I firmly believe, and will fight on it, that this game should have been rated E10+. According to the ESRB website, World's End Club is rated T for teen because of the intro cutscene. And sure, I'll give you it is weird, creepy, and honestly out of place in a game that uses a 100% different style, but this scene should not have bumped it up to T. The presentation of this game screams younger audience, perhaps a target audience that is the same age as the main characters. The constant breaking out into a happy-go-lucky song, aka variations on the Go-Getters theme, screams younger audience in my eyes. The story of this game even feels like what you'd see in a show directed for younger audiences but can be enjoyed by adults. The marketing looked like they were targeting fans of Danganronpa and Zero Escape due to the reputation of the game's creators. However, due to the presentation, I can see and have seen several fans being turned off of this game. If the game was targeted to an audience to create its own fanbase rather than relying on the creator's reputation, it probably would have done better than it did. After all, I'm pretty sure the average person doesn't pay particular attention to the credits of any game, movie, or show, so there's no guarantee the fans of these franchises have even heard of Kotaro Ichikoshi and Kazutaka Kodaka, let alone know that they were making this game. In my opinion, the marketing should have been reflective of the game itself rather than the creators. And this game is as much T for teen as Donkey Konga 2. Yes, there is mild cartoon violence and mild language, but you've got mild cartoon violence in any stylized action game, like Mario or Sonic, and those are rated E for everyone. And there is mild language in Donkey Konga 2, but if I'm remembering my video game history correctly, then did the E10+ rating come into existence specifically because Donkey Konga 2 should not have been rated T, yet the mild language kept it from being rated E? And in that case, the only logical conclusion is that World's End Club should have been rated E10+2. That's what this presentation screams to me. Cute art, an amazing soundtrack, but misrated by the ESRB. World's End Club is an interesting experiment of a game. The gameplay is unfortunately the weakest part of it though. Not because it's hard. Compared to some other games I've played, this game is actually pretty easy. I'm just bad at the genre. No, the problem with the gameplay is that on the Switch at least, it feels very stiff. The game feels like it fit right at home on iOS, but it seems like it just doesn't translate that well to console. Thankfully, the story and presentation more than makes up for the gameplay. In the end, I really enjoyed the story of this game. Though, as I stated in the story section, there was one story beat that actively bothered me, and I feel like could have worked if it was executed better, as it is that particular story beat that just felt forced and out of place least. The presentation was wonderful. Only a tiny issue with some of the voice work, but otherwise wonderful. OST of 2021, right there. In the end, I liked World's End Club. Granted, the story is more memorable than the gameplay, and the presentation even more memorable than the story. You have no idea how much I listened to that OST. I'm sure if the gameplay was stronger, then the love for this game would be stronger too. Not just from within me, but from other people as well. If you're going into this game expecting something like Danganronpa or Zero Escape, then you're going to be disappointed. But if you're going in expecting an indie action game that deserves to be E10+, yes, I'm not letting that go, with a long involved story, then I'm sure you'll find something you like too.